like to give the floor to the UNICA President, Professor Luciano SASO. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Laura. Good morning to everyone. It is a great pleasure to be here with you today for this important webinar on supporting students and scholars at risk, efforts and good practices of UNICA and CIVIS universities, organized by the network UNICA and Sapienza University in cooperation with CIVIS. Just a couple of words about UNICA. As you know, is an important network based in Brussels with 54 universities in 38 capital cities, and very active on this topic of scholars at risk. We organized several events in the past, and we are looking forward to organize others in the future. We are a collective member of Scholars at Risk, and really we value this cooperation for this important topic. Sapienza University, as you know, is a large research-intensive university in Italy. And CIVIS is a strong alliance that was created recently in response to the pilot call of the European Commission in creating the new European universities, as you might know. At the moment, CIVIS has as members Sapienza University, Aix-Marseille University in France, which is the coordinator of the project, Autónoma de Madrid, Université Libre de Bruxelles, the University of Glasgow, the University of Stockholm, the University of Bucharest, and the University of Athens, the National Capodistran University of Athens. And so together, as you can see also in CIVIS, there are several UNICA universities, so we already organized several events together, and for this topic also we decided to join forces. So without further ado, it is a great pleasure to start with our keynote speaker. Today is a great honor to have with us Denise Roche. She's Advocacy Manager at Scholars at Risk Europe. Denise leads Scholars at Risk Europe advocacy work to promote academic freedom, including convening the European Coordinating Committee for Academic Freedom Advocacy. Prior to joining SAR Europe in July 2020, she held positions at the National Women's Council, the Law Reform Commission, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, the Irish Mission to the United Nations in New York, and she acted as a Judicial Fellow of the High Court. So Denise will give a talk today on academic freedom in the world, and it is a pleasure to give the screen to you, Denise.
Thank you very much, Luciano, and thank you to UNICA, CIVIS and Sapienza University for inviting SAR Europe here today to discuss the topic of academic freedom. Good morning, everyone, and without further ado. Around the world, higher education communities are overwhelmed by attacks on scholars, students, staff, and their institutions. State and non-state actors, including armed militant and extremist groups, as well as police and military forces, and even members of their own community, carry out these attacks, which often result in deaths, injuries, and imprisonments. These attacks harm the individuals and institutions directly targeted, but they have broader impacts. They are designed to undermine entire education systems. They diminish the quality of teaching, research, and discourse on campus. They constrict society space to think, question, and share ideas. Ultimately, they impact all of us by damaging higher education's unique capacity to enrich society. Scholars at Risk was founded over 20 years ago to protect threatened scholars and to advance the human rights that the higher education space needs to function. Rights including academic freedom, the right to education, and freedom of assembly. This international network now comprises of over 550 higher education institutions across 43 countries around the world. And we continue to grow as more and more institutions pledge their commitment to our collective mission. And we are indebted to our members, including UNICA and many of your universities. It is through the power of this collective that SAR has been able to provide placements for threatened scholars, campaigns for those imprisoned, document attacks on higher education communities, and organise countless talks, workshops, meetings, advocating for greater protection of scholars and academic freedom. The topic for my discussion is academic freedom in the world today. And in many ways, the timing of this event is fortuitous as it follows the release of SAR's Free to Think report, the 7th in a series of annual reports documenting attacks on higher education communities around the world. This latest publication analyses 332 reported attacks in 65 countries over a 12-month period. But these figures tell us only part of the story. Given the limited resources available, the scope, variety, and complexity of attacks occurring, and a common fear among survivors to report attacks, we have long stressed that the figures we capture through our monitoring work only represent a small fraction of the total number of attacks, a position borne out by the findings of the Academic Freedom Index. Launched 2 years ago, this index shifts the focus from individual attacks to wider trends and measures each country's adherence to academic freedom based on 5 key indicators. This powerful dataset demonstrates that academic freedom is on a downward trajectory in most parts of the world. This year's Free to Think report highlights 5 broad categories of threats to academic freedom around the globe. First, non-state actors, including armed groups and individuals, carried out severe, violent attacks on higher education communities. And these occurred in countries experiencing extremism or conflict, where these communities can sometimes be perceived as either symbols of state authority or sources of opposition to radical ideologies. The 2021 report documents killings, violence, and disappearances in a number of countries, including Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Yemen, and Haiti. The second category concerns states using detentions, prosecutions, and other coercive legal measures to punish or restrict scholars' research, teaching, or associations. Measures such as civil and criminal defamation laws, blasphemy, national security, or terrorism laws. And since SAR's monitoring project's inception, we have documented more than 700 incidents involving wrongful imprisonment or prosecution, and over 100 of which occurred during this past year. The third category, and this was happening long before the onset of the pandemic, concerns states imposing restrictions on free movement. This includes denying entry or exit visas, deportations, and blacklisting. For example, over the past year, China's government issued sanctions against select scholars, researchers, and institutions in the European Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States, in apparent retaliation for research that displeased the government. Meanwhile, Israel's government continues to maintain policies and practices that severely restrict academic movement in and out of the occupied Palestinian territory. These actions frustrate the free flow of ideas across borders that is essential to quality higher education and to building global understanding and cooperation. The fourth category concerns the loss of position. And this is where officials suspend, fire, or take disciplinary action against faculty and students for their academic work and extramural expressive activities. This could cover being critical of their institutions or participation in protests and social movements. And this is happening, for example, in Belarus, Myanmar, and Turkey, where state and military leaders pushed for mass dismissals and suspensions of students and scholars for their peaceful dissent. The 2021 report also discusses a range of actions taken against lecturers and researchers and other academic personnel in India, Hong Kong, Nicaragua, Bulgaria, the United States, and elsewhere. Finally, we are seeing threats that take the form of legislative or administrative actions. While these incidents have no element of violence or coercion, they do curtail academic freedom. For example, Turkey's president appointed a political ally as rector of one of the country's top universities, prompting months of protests decrying the government's erosion of institutional autonomy. In the United States, state legislatures advanced and in some cases secured passage of bills that would ban topics and areas of academic discussion in classrooms, most notably critical race theory. These moves echo similar events in Europe over the last few years that targeted gender studies. But we are also witnessing the rise of strategic litigation as a tool to silence researchers, scholars, and scientists who speak out on topics of public interest. More commonly known as SLAPs, these lawsuits have a particularly chilling effect on academic freedom and public discourse. Time-consuming, resource-exhausting, they damage reputations and discourage scholars from pursuing their work and engaging in informed debate. Not as well captured in our monitoring work, but threats nonetheless, are those that exist at the more subtle end of the spectrum. For example, self-censorship is a pervasive issue and one that is very difficult to measure. For a variety of reasons, scholars may avoid raising topics that are relevant to their fields of study. In a free and open academic environment, they would not be limited in this way. Other subtle yet common pressures are those of competition and marketization of higher education. When an institution is under financial pressure, there is a risk that core values like academic freedom will be neglected. In short, more governments are implementing repressive measures aimed at curtailing civil society in all its forms, including in states that until very recently enjoyed relatively good levels of academic freedom and democracy. This is forming a shrinking space for civil society and academic freedom. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated all of these threats and moved some of them online for now. But motivations behind the threats remain the same: to control or silence research and expression that is deemed threatening to authorities. So it can serve as no surprise that the demand for SARS protection services continues to grow. And since the fall of Kabul, the SAR network has received more than 1,500 applications and referrals from Afghanistan. But to put this figure in context, this is almost double the number of applications we received in the whole of last year from all countries combined. But here is where the strength and value of our network is clear for all to see. Dozens of institutions in Europe and around the world have stepped forward and signaled their willingness to host scholars from Afghanistan. Many have already pledged funding to do so, while others are working hard to put the necessary supports in place. There is also a common recognition of the need for government's policies to change. Over 160 higher education networks, associations, and institutions across Europe, including UNICA, endorsed our coordinated Afghanistan appeal directed at European governments and the EU. This appeal focused on delivering practical supports to those at risk, such as providing safe passage out of Afghanistan and expediting visas, among other measures. The good news is that governments are taking action, albeit to varying degrees, so we continue to engage with partners and policymakers on these matters. Of course, even while we work together to meet the crisis situation in Afghanistan, our other work does not rest. And in Europe, SAR Europe, the European office of the network, works to increase understanding, protection for, and implementation of academic freedom Europe-wide. And toward this end, last year we established the European Coordinating Committee for Academic Freedom Advocacy. And this essential group ensures that SAR's work reaches beyond the higher education community into offices of politicians, government officials, journalists, and stakeholders at regional bodies such as the EU and the Council of Europe. Indeed, SAR's network in Europe is strong. It includes 360 institutions in 27 European countries, including 10 major partner networks and 13 SAR sections with the recent launch of SAR Flanders. It is important to see this network grow, but particularly now at a time when there are so many developments in Europe, both concerning and encouraging. On a concerning front, academic freedom has already been in the spotlight here based on threats occurring closer and closer to home. On the more severe end of the spectrum, there are two members of the European higher education area that figure at the very bottom of the academic freedom index, Belarus and Turkey. But we have also seen threats to academic freedom from within the European Union, most notably from Poland and Hungary, often in the form of legal or administrative actions. On the encouraging front, as we open our event today, it is clear that at the policy level in Europe, there is increasing attention to and recognition of the value of academic freedom and of the need for increased support for at-risk scholars, researchers, and students. This is especially so at the European Union, where academic freedom is beginning to have her very necessary day in the sun. It has been explicitly referenced in a number of important instruments, including action plans for human rights and democracy. References to it have also been added to both Horizon Europe and Erasmus+ legal texts. If nothing else, this move will have powerful symbolic meaning. The Bonn Declaration on the Freedom of Scientific Research was signed between the European Commission and the member states of the EU. And the Strategic Forum for International Cooperation has issued an opinion on its implementation with good, concrete recommendations, including, for example, inviting the European Commission to consider establishing a dedicated fellowship scheme open to researchers under threat, effectively making the EU a safe haven for freedom of scientific research. In making this recommendation, they drew on a proposal from the SAR Europe coordinated and EU-funded Inspire Europe project. And the commitments keep coming, and they are becoming more progressive. The European Commission's communication on its global approach to research and innovation states, scientific research thrives thanks to freedom of thought, the development of a critical mind, argumentation based on evidence, and the rejection of the argument of authority. The EU should therefore continue to offer researchers and innovators a democratic, inclusive, and supportive environment, devoid of political interference, defending academic freedom and the opportunity for curiosity-driven research, under the respect and protection of the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. Strong words, language, of course, to be encouraged. And with the adoption of the European Research Area Policy Agenda, we are seeing concrete commitments emerge as it plans to publish the first European monitoring report on the freedom of scientific research. And to all of this, it can be added that 2020 also saw a report on the role and protection of academic freedom by the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to freedom of opinion and expression, as well as a resolution on threats to academic freedom and autonomy by the Council of Europe. There was also a statement on academic freedom at the 2020 Ministerial Conference to the European higher education area. And the Bologna follow-up group is currently making efforts to look into how to monitor fundamental values. And the catalogue of statements, resolutions, reports, and communiques continue to grow. Implementing these commitments has to be the priority now, and SAR Europe will continue to press for the concrete implementation of policies and practices in Europe and beyond that promote academic freedom and protect at-risk scholars, whether they be from Afghanistan, Yemen, Turkey, Belarus, or elsewhere. 2022 will see the publication of the European Commission's strategy for universities, presenting another opportunity for the Commission to unequivocally promote academic freedom as an essential precondition of a healthy higher education sector. We believe it provides an ideal platform on which to drive a common understanding and implementation of this fundamental value and human right. But on a more practical level, it is also an opportunity to take stock of the different measures to date and to look at ways in which it can enhance the complementarity between them, because it's making for a complex landscape. Of course, threats to academic freedom, scholars and students exist along a continuum, ranging from subtle threats like self-censorship or harassment to the more severe threats like we have seen in Afghanistan, where risks of violence and bodily harm are all too real. So there are a diversity of challenges to face, and when we're talking about threats to academic freedom, and they do require different solutions. But the key is that as we work towards solutions, the right hand should always know what the left hand is doing. Otherwise, policies fail, and ultimately it is people who fall through the cracks. Because We are talking about people and their lives, their dreams and their aspirations, those that are prevented from contributing to society and those that are prevented from benefiting from those contributions, which of course is everyone else. So we are all in this together. The problem is that some of us are far more aware of this than others. So when we are talking about ways in which we can support at-risk students and scholars, we need to talk about how to raise awareness about academic freedom itself. And as the first line of defense, there is a lot that higher education institutions can do. The most important thing is to ensure that academic freedom is deeply embedded within the culture of your institutions. And one of the best ways to do this is to do what you all do best, and that is teach. Teach academic freedom as an essential component of quality in higher education. The essence of this proposal was recently captured by the President of Ireland, Michael D. Higgins, in a talk he gave on academic freedom. He suggested that higher education institutions should adopt a module on the nature and role of the university, including what he termed the cornerstone of academic freedom to be taught to every incoming university student in order to raise awareness of the importance of this freedom. And I would broaden this to include faculty, leaders, and staff. This is not a radical suggestion. Many other professions require training about their core values and ethics, for example, law, medicine, and journalism. So in the same way that we have induction courses on ICT security and research funding, we should also have courses on academic freedom, because we cannot take it for granted that academic freedom is widely understood, even within universities themselves. And the benefits of advancing this proposal are threefold. First, students, staff, and faculty will become familiarized with not only with what academic freedom is, but with the norms of intellectual discourse on campus. It will also ensure that those that are negotiating international agreements with other institutions will consider the implications of academic freedom in those agreements. Second, those within the academic community can be ambassadors of academic freedom. As they leave campus and go out into the world of work, they can take with them an understanding of what academic freedom is, how it can be protected, but most importantly, why it should be preserved. This is crucially important because right now we cannot guarantee that our government ministries, politicians, judges, or even lawyers fully understand the concept of academic freedom, how it relates to their daily work, and the implications for society when it is repressed. Let us not forget that moves to repress it number among the first symptoms of greater systemic problems taking root in a state, and all should be vigilant against these incursions. And this leads us to the third effect. By taking steps to actively teach more people about academic freedom, we can help to engage the wider defense of academic freedom, and we need members of the general public to engage with this issue. To do this, we need to dispel the idea that academic freedom is a privileged right of the very few, whose curtailment carries no wider implications for society, because this is not true. Society benefits from the knowledge and expertise developed within an open and secure higher education sector. So the protection of academic freedom is in the interest of all, and so should become the responsibility of all. But of immediate concern are those that are fleeing their homes, and they need practical assistance now. It is essential that we continue to show solidarity and provide concrete support to those who face serious risks to their lives and their work and their studies. Institutions can help by offering temporary positions of academic refuge. SAR, CARA, the Scholars Rescue Fund, PAUSE, the Philip Schwartz Initiative all offer ways in which this can be done. And many universities in Europe and around the world are already doing their part. However, this work is becoming more urgent, particularly as we continue to see increasing applications from Afghanistan, while also high numbers from Yemen, Turkey, Syria, Brazil, and Iran persist. Therefore, where possible, more national governments need to do as Germany and France have done and establish national support programs to support at-risk or displaced scholars and students. And we need to ensure that they do. For our part, SAR Europe has joined forces with several partners across Europe in an EU-funded project called Inspire Europe, as mentioned earlier. We're trying to improve the working environment in Europe for scholars and researchers at risk. And as part of this, we are calling on the European Commission to launch a dedicated EU fellowship scheme. In addition to providing urgent support to individual scholars, dedicated EU support would serve to publicly highlight the crucial role of scholars and academic freedom in democratic societies. The attacks documented in Free to Think demonstrate the range of tactics deployed by diverse actors seeking to punish and silence scholars, students, and other members of higher education communities exercising their right to ideas. They discourage research, teaching, and discussion. They undermine universities, colleges, and research institutions attempting to provide solutions to problems that impact everyone, from COVID-19 to climate change. They impede the ability of higher education to help shape tomorrow's leaders. We must defend against these attacks. We must strengthen and promote academic freedom and quality higher education. And we must do this now because our future depends on it. I look forward to all the input we will receive from the distinguished experts today, and I thank you all for your time and attention.
Many thanks, Denise, for this excellent presentation. Really very comprehensive and very useful for this webinar. So thank you very much. I remind all participants that we will open the discussion at the end. So now we continue with the program, and then please put in the chat all possible questions that you have for Denise. So it's a pleasure now to continue with the program and give the floor to Martin Irwin, named contact for forced migrants at the University of Glasgow, and he will give a talk on widening access to forced migrant students.
Great. So yeah, thank you. I am just going to talk a bit about the situation in Glasgow at the moment, and also the various different supports that we have in place to help forced migrant students. So just a wee bit on the situation in Glasgow at the moment. We have, according to the latest figures, just over 3,500 asylum seekers in the city who are receiving what's called Section 95 support. So that's either financial assistance or accommodation from the Home Office, or both. This number doesn't include asylum seekers who aren't receiving this type of support, and it doesn't include people with different or other immigration statuses, so those who are a wee bit further on in the asylum process. So it doesn't include refugees, people with humanitarian protection or indefinite leave to remain, any of those. So that suggests, I think, that the forced migrant community in Glasgow is much larger than this top figure would suggest, particularly because we've had quite high numbers coming into the city over the past 20 or so years. So yeah, this is the most of any local authority in the UK by a decent margin. It's just under 8% of the UK total number of asylum seekers receiving Section 95 support, and it's just under 99% of the Scotland total. So that's the kind of the raw numbers, I suppose. But I also wanted to draw your attention to a series of incidents that took place over the early months of the pandemic that have led to a temporary ban from the city on accepting further asylum seekers. So the decision was made to move asylum seekers from their normal accommodation into hotels that weren't being used because of the pandemic. And campaigners have said that this accommodation was unsuitable, and they argue that it was behind a series of incidents. So there was quite a high-profile case where one of the residents of one of these hotels sadly stabbed 6 other residents and was subsequently shot dead by police. In another hotel, another man died by apparent suicide, and there was also the death of a woman in other accommodation, which is quite a tragic case. So yeah, the community in Glasgow has been through quite a lot over the pandemic. So that's the context in which we're working. In terms of what we provide, I've split it into 2 categories. So talk a wee bit about policies, and then I'll discuss some of the kind of practical things that we do. So first of all, forced migrants are a priority 1 category in our contextual admissions policy, and this basically means that they are guaranteed an adjusted offer at the lowest possible entry requirement rate, and they're also eligible for all of our pre-entry programs. So this means that they can basically take full part in and take benefit from the suite of widening participation programs that we already have in operation, and they can smooth their transition into university through those. We also, for asylum seekers, guarantee them either home or RUK fee status. So for those based in Scotland, they get home fee status, and for those based elsewhere in the UK, they get RUK fee status. And what this means is that their fees, their course fees, come down from the really sort of sky-high international rate down to the much more achievable home rate, and then the sort of intermediate RUK rate. And this means that they can then apply for different scholarships, such as our humanitarian scholarship, which has a full fee waiver, and they can also apply to external organisations like the Carnegie Trust, who will fund Scottish asylum seekers at the home fee rate, and we help people with those applications. We've also just this year in June, I think it was, bid to become a University of Sanctuary. And if you don't know what that is, it's a network of universities who have pledged to support forced migrant students as best they can. And this was quite a big undertaking. It took about a year, I think, quite a big cross-institutional affair. I also wanted to share this. It's a guidance document published by University Scotland in conjunction with the Scottish Refugee Council, and it ties in with the Scottish Government's New Scots policy. And it really sets out how Scottish universities should be treating forced migrants, and it also, goes into quite a bit of detail about the various rights and entitlements in the Scottish context. So I'm not aware of a similar document elsewhere in the UK, but I could be wrong. So in terms of practical support, we have a refugee and asylum seeker champion. That is Rachel Sanderson, who was originally meant to be giving this talk. She is a very, very senior person in the university, and she has a lot of clout, so she can get things done, really. So if I raise issues with her, she can either make the decision to change, to fix the issue, or she knows who to put the issue to. So it's really, really useful having somebody like that working with you in this area. I'll talk a wee bit more about my job in a minute, but the other thing, a new development this year is the Access programme. So like the others I mentioned, this is a pre-entry programme that's been running for a number of years, but unlike the others, there's a fee attached to this one for kind of historical reasons. So this year we put in place fee waivers for asylum seekers, and we have, 25 asylum seeking students on the Access programme this year. And we're also going to be covering their UCAS application fee. So if they pass the programme and if their applications are successful, then they could be starting their degrees at Glasgow, or different unis actually, from September 2022. Forced migrants are also eligible for a variety of loans and grants and scholarships and bursaries that we have in place already. I've listed a few of these here, so it's things like laptop loans, help with travel costs, and data access is a big one, because I don't know if you're aware, but in the UK, in home office accommodation, asylum seekers aren't given Wi-Fi, they aren't given internet access, and because of their circumstances and the restrictions that they are forced to live under, they are unable to obtain it for themselves, really. So yeah, I think that's quite an important scheme, and one that I hope grows, actually. We also work quite closely with some student groups. So the main one is STAR, which is Student Action for Refugees, and they are a network of student groups in different universities across the UK, campaigning for reform. And they've helped us with the sanctuary bid and also with things to do with the access fee waivers this year as well. So in terms of my role, it's very varied. One thing to point out is that I'm situated in Widening Participation, or WP, and other people who I have spoken to performing similar roles at other universities are often based in teams like student support or student well-being. So they're very much focused on the people who are already in the university, whereas I suppose my overriding focus is on getting people into the university. So yeah, it's quite a significant difference, I think. In terms of the support that I offer, it's everything from pre-application all the way to on-course support. So I help with finding different pathways into the students' desired course. So, you know, put them in touch with different pre-entry programs, help them apply to funding bodies and things like this. I also provide a lot of advice on the fees and funding side of things, you know, the home and RUK status, because that's quite a concern for many students. And in terms of the on-course support, that's more about advocacy. So a student will come to me with a particular issue, and I will take their issue to the relevant team within the university to try and ensure that they get the support that they need, or sometimes even take the case to people outside the university as well. Yeah, so just sort of patching them up with, or matching them up, sorry, with existing supports, basically. But overall, I would say it's a very, very varied role. It's very person specific. And what I mean by that is that these people have very, very complicated lives and have been through an awful lot. So their individual circumstances are almost always unique. So it takes a lot of time and effort to ensure that they get the support that they need. I think I've probably gone slightly over time, but that's me, that's the role, and that's Glasgow. Happy to take questions at the end.
Thank you very much, Martin, and congratulations to the University of Glasgow for being so active and so useful for the Scholars at Risk. So now we proceed with the program. It's a pleasure to leave the screen to Sena GALAZZI. She's Associate Program Officer at UNESCO-TWAS, the World Academy of Sciences, and she will give a talk on the Science in Exile initiative.
Thank you very much, Professor SASO. I'm just loading up my presentation. I hope this is all right and everyone can see this. Okay, so my name is Sena GALAZZI, as Associate Programs Officer at UNESCO-TWAS, TWAS being the World Academy of Sciences. I'm very pleased to be here today. First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's really a pleasure to join this very important webinar. So yes, today I'll be telling you a little bit about the Science in Exile initiative. This is something that is quite new for my organization. It only started in the last couple of years, but I think it's a great example of innovation and what putting together different minds and different organizations can lead to. So we run this with the IAP and ISC, that's the International Science Council and the Inter-Academy Partnership. So it's these three organizations together that gave birth to this initiative. So we're working in the context of science. And when we first started this initiative, we were looking at data and realized that although the global displacement trends are quite clear, actually we don't know exactly how many scientists are among these numbers. And particularly, we don't know how many are women. And you know, gender equality is a very important priority for us also. What we also realized is that a lot of these displaced scientists come from very well-developed science systems that are in effect dismantled with such a large brain drain of scientists, whereas other scientists are displaced by countries where there's an extremely poor and limited scientific infrastructure. So think of Myanmar, Sudan, Afghanistan, etc. So there's a very different context that we're looking at. And we know that in both of these categories, without the appropriate support, such displaced scientists might never be able to pick up their career again. So this is a huge problem, of course. In terms of timeline, as I was saying, this is a quite recent initiative. It only really started officially in 2020, so we are quite new and doing our best at starting things up as quickly and well as we can. The initial thinking behind it really came out of a workshop that we hosted in 2017. And out of that emerged this concept note, and then with funding and with our partners, we managed to launch this initiative. So the official launch was just this year. And we set up a steering committee, which I'm proud to say includes several displaced or refugee scientists among them, as well as other scientists and other experts from some of the leading organizations in this field. So we did a lot of listening in this initial startup phase of our program. And through a series of workshops, we started listening to what the priorities were and to what the real issues were. And one of the first things we noticed is that gender is a huge lens. It's a very important lens for us to consider when looking at the experiences of such scientists, because for women, things are quite different at times. Their decisions to leave compared to those of men are sometimes similar, but other times different. And gender often is exacerbated in times of crises. So for example, we know that more or less among the global displacement figures, about 48% of these are women. And of course, we don't know exactly how many are scientists, but what we do know is that gender affects not only their reasons for migrating, but also what will happen to them once they reach a host country. And along the way, there's a lot of gender dynamics that will impact whether they are able to resume their scientific or research careers or not. And this is a very important thing to keep in mind, we think, because especially for women scientists, we know that after displacement, their careers might never recover. What we also found is a number of priorities that displaced scientists have expressed to us in the various workshops and consultative meetings we've held. So, of course, in general, there's a need for a better support system, right, which has been already addressed. And specifically, people have told us of how, the first thing, especially as we've seen recently with the case of Afghanistan, of course, is to find physical safety and residence status. And sometimes the scientific career can be an asset in this sense. But securing fellowships or other positions is really challenging because although there's some fantastic work that's being done out there and a lot of opportunities, many more in the years are being developed, of course, demand is very high and there's not enough. So this is really key in terms of maintaining active careers and rebuilding them where necessary in new countries. And we also see this as important to one day, if the scientists so desire, to be able to contribute to rebuilding science systems back at home. So for the Science in Exile initiative, the preservation of science is a very important theme. So what we did is after these workshops and meetings and task teams set up, we developed a strategic framework that will guide the initiative going forward in the post-2021 phase. So our mission is quite clear. We just want to help enhance the work and lives of such scientists. And we hope to be able to contribute to developing an international movement that works together to ensure that these contributions to science can help become contributions to humanity from these scientists. So we're doing a number of things, and in the interest of time, I won't go through all of these objectives, but you can see on screen more or less how we structure our thinking and our program. So We have developed a number of activities in the last year or so, and mostly we've divided them into 4 categories, and each category has now a dedicated task team that is made up of people who are in the networks of the 3 organizing partners and beyond, because of course in these consultative and participatory months, we've managed to actually bring on board a lot of people who are experienced in this field and a lot of displaced scientists themselves, which we think is really key here. So we've developed an advocacy campaign. Again, this is all in early stages, but nonetheless, it's really taking off well, we think. The advocacy campaign has had things like a webinar series, podcasts, declaration, and a whole lot of outputs that we hope will result in getting more people on board towards these shared objectives. We're also developing programs of support, and I'll tell you a little bit more later about one of them specifically that is launching today, actually. Then we're doing some mapping and research, so trying to carry out a quite large-scale survey of organizations and programs that exist out there to make sure that these opportunities are available. And in terms of this, we have a website coming up in the next couple of weeks where we will display this as a searchable database. So we're quite looking forward to that. And we've also had some Afghanistan response activities that we've tried to set up quickly, which we hope have led to some contributions from our side. So as I was saying, the advocacy campaign is something that's been taking up quite a bit of our time. We have the most important output perhaps being this declaration, which is, we've had an informal soft launch happening last month, where we're getting some of the key stakeholders on board with this, to be officially launched in February or March next year, where we will start reaching out to partners, stakeholders, and other members of the higher education system to endorse it and to commit to working together towards these objectives. And as I was saying earlier, some webinars, we've had 4 of them so far, where we try to really listen to the experiences of displaced scientists in the various phases of their displacement. So we started off with unfolding emergencies, which at the time of our webinar was, of course, Myanmar and Ethiopia were happening. This is back in May that we were planning this, and the webinar happened in June. And then on and so forth with protracted situations of displacement. And then we culminated with the last webinar that was what happens when return is possible. So when scientists are able to go back. And I'd also just like to highlight the podcast series. This is hosted on the platform run by the International Science Council, our partners. So they on their website, you can find all these episodes, and I think they're really great. Their firsthand experiences by different scientists that share, what kind of challenges they've had and their successes as well. And lastly, the survey that we've been running, which will be coming up very shortly into a website that will display these. And finally, this program of support, which I mentioned earlier, we're developing a number of these. This is something that is launching today. So we're very excited. Of course, we fully realize it's a drop in the ocean. There's a lot of demand out there. And, this program in particular is run with COMSTEC in Pakistan. So, of course, it emerged as part of the Afghanistan response. And, just in the short term, we felt like we were able to set aside some funding that was devoted to other activities, and partly also thanks to COVID and lack of travel was still available, and repurposing it to doing something quite tangible that could help scientists in challenging conditions. So this is starting very soon, so people should be able to start their placements in 2022. And as I said, the call is launching today, so that's quite big news for us. We will look at funding both PhD and postdoctoral fellowships in Pakistan. And our webpage should be live in a couple of hours, I hope. And yes, so this is for us a very big achievement, although again, we know it's a drop in the ocean, but hopefully this will be just the first of many more programs to come. So we're very keen on learning from this experience, and we're trying as much as we can also, of course, to learn from the many distinguished organizations that are already running programs like this. So I think I'll leave it at that. I would really be happy to get in touch with anyone who's here today, and I welcome not only your questions today, but of course, my email is there on the screen. So please get in touch if you have any questions or suggestions or anything like that. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Sena. Really very interesting also for your offer to keep in touch with the people in need. Of course, there are many, as you just said, unfortunately, probably the opportunities are not enough for all the people in need, but we are trying our best. And one of the goals of this meeting is indeed to put people together who can offer opportunities to the people in need. So again, thank you very much. Also, congratulations to the institutions that you represent. Many, we have to say, really working together for these important, goals. And now it is a pleasure to give the floor to Delphine Dieudonné. She is the manager of the International Welcome Desk at Université Libre de Bruxelles, and she will give a talk on solidarity funds at ULB.
Yes. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, perfect, thanks.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Nice to meet you virtually. So I'm Delphine Dieudonné. I'm in charge of the International Welcome Desk at ULB, and especially the welcoming of international researchers. And this framework, I'm also in charge of the Solidarity Funds program, which I will now introduce to you. So the Université Libre de Bruxelles has created a Solidarity Fund in order to provide support for researchers who no longer have the freedom to pursue their research in their home country, where they are treated due to the content of their scientific work or to the opinions they have freely expressed. The Solidarity Fund provides postdoctoral fellowships, enabling treating academics to continue their work at ULB in a climate of academic freedom. The Solidarity Fellowship consists in a 1 year, so 12 months, postdoctoral position, amounting to approximately 29,000 euro net. This fund was initially created in 2016 in response to the Syrian crisis. It was then from 2017 made permanent and is open to all researchers at risk now. In 2017, 4 grants were allocated. In 2018, 5 grants were allocated. In 2019, 6 grants, and in 2020, 2. This year, 6 researchers are working at ULB. They come from Turkey, Brazil, Burundi, Iran, and Ethiopia. Each year, the researchers come from different countries, so we have a wide representation from different countries. Each year, we receive more than 100 applications, and about 20 are eligible and are reviewed by the selection committee. So now we will talk about the process to apply for this scholarship. So there are some eligibility requirements that are mandatory to apply for this scholarship. So it's the first requirement is to hold a PhD and occupy or have occupied a research position in a university in the home country, not have been established for more than 8 years in another country than the country in which the researcher is at risk, not have obtained a PhD more than 8 years before the fellowship start date, be currently at risk in their home country due to the content of their work or to the idea they have openly expressed, not to have reside or carry out their main activity in Belgium, like work or studies, for more than 24 months during the 36 months immediately preceding the fellowship start date. This is a mobility rule that we have to respect because it's in the Belgium law to give this type of scholarship, and so this rule allows to be exempted from taxes. Be able to stay in Belgium for a full time at ULB, have a good knowledge of written and spoken English and of French, so minimum B2. Find a supervisor at ULB. It's important because the supervisor has to will support and welcome the researcher during all the stay at ULB, and also will of course supervise the researcher. But it's not just only about the research, but it's also to be there to support and to welcome the researcher. So it's really important to find a supervisor, and the supervisor had to send us a document explaining how he will integrate the researcher in the lab, in the research center at ULB, if he will organize something special for the researcher and so on. So it's an important implication of the professor, of the supervisor in this project. And at the end of the year of the grant, current beneficiaries may apply a second time upon favorable advice from the promoter. It's not written in the document, but to apply and to prove that they respect all these requirements, they have to send me a lot of documents, like the copy of the PhD diploma, of the CV, motivation letter, and all document attesting the danger in the country, explaining the situation and so on, to have all explanation to very good understand the situation of the researcher. If the researcher meets the eligibility criteria, its file will then be analyzed by the selection committee. And then there is the second step, the choice by the selection committee. For this step, there are some selection requirements. The scientific quality of the candidate and of the research project, the dangerous situation to which the candidate is exposed, and the capacity for integration. Now I will speak about the organization of the project. So there are two committees. The first is the management committee. So the management committee takes all necessary initiative for the execution of institutional decisions concerning researchers at risk, can suggest action to the university authorities. It meets at least twice a year, before the launch of the call for application and after the selection of candidates by the selection committee to validate the selection, of course. If necessary, an exceptional meeting may be convened. The International Relations Department is responsible for the management of the fund and the implementation of decisions taken by the management committee. Then we have the selection committee. The selection committee reviews applications, takes into account the opinion of experts, selects successful candidates for the call, and meets once a year for selection. Just a few words about the experts. Of course, it's very hard for the member of the selection committee to know all the situation and danger and political situation in each country in the world. So we have some experts that are consulted by the member of the selection committee to advise them in the choice of candidates. Experts are chosen according to the geographical area from which eligible candidates come, and they are appointed by the member of the selection committee. But they can vote. It's just an advice, it's just some precision, but they can vote for the choice of the candidates. So the composition is different. So we have the management committee with the vice rector external relation, who is the head of the committee, vice rector student and social affairs, a representative of the research department, two academic representatives, the diversity policy advisor, one representative of the scientific community, the head of the international relations department, and the head of the international welcome desk. This is for the management committee. And then we have the selection committee with the vice rector external relations 2, the diplomatic advisor, and two academics. And of course, if one of the two academics supports a candidate, that academic can participate in the selection of the candidates. So what the fund offers to researchers? So as I already said, a postdoctoral fellowship that will allow researchers at risk to continue their work at ULB in a climate of academic freedom. a one-time renewable grant, so it's possible to renew for 1 year, a relocation allowance of 2,500 euro, free French language classes during the stay at ULB, a welcome and daily support by the International Welcome Desk, and a welcome reception organized by the ULB authorities in November, and end of stay drink in May too. But of course, we have a lot of challenge for this project. The first big challenge is the fact that we have very limited financial resources. It's only ULB's own resources, so we don't have any help from the government of any public or private actor. So it's very hard, and we can only offer 6 scholarships per year. It's very limited, and as I already said, we have more than 100 applications per year, so it's a lot. And we can't increase the number of scholarships. So this is a big challenge. For the moment, we are working to find some financial help from other actors, but for the moment, we don't know if it will be possible. The other challenge is the fact that they can stay only for maximum 2 years at ULB. And it's very short because they need time to be integrated in the country, to feel good in the country, to meet some people, to have time to understand how ULB works, and to start to work in the lab and with some professor. And so it's very long, and 2 years is very short. So it's a big challenge. But we can offer more than 2 years because of the very limited financial resources, and also because we are the only French-speaking university at the moment that offers this type of program. So we can propose to a researcher to continue their research in another university in Belgium, because we are the only that propose this type of program. So this is also another big challenge. And finally, the problem also is after. So it's very hard for the researchers at risk to integrate themselves in the normal academic career or Belgium academic careers. And so they continue to receive grants for researchers at risk in different countries, like in France with POSE, and in Germany, and then in Belgium with Solidarity Fund. But very, very hard to them to be integrated in the academic career. And this is a big challenge, because it's not possible for them to just continue with scholarship for researchers at risk. And so the big challenge is to help them to be integrated in the academic career that is very, very hard to be integrated in. So this is a big challenge for her to help them for that, but for the moment it's not a success. So we have to work for that. Just last word, it's about a new call that we launched 2 weeks ago. It's a call only for Afghan researchers. So because of the current situation, we have decided to launch a new call only for Afghan researchers in collaboration with another university in Belgium, UC Louvain. And so it's collaboration ULB UCL, and we can offer 4 scholarships for researchers, Afghan researchers. And we work with FedAzil, who is an actor in Belgium who help migrants, to help us to distribute the call to the good public and to Afghan researchers. So that is the new project. And so we have, yes, 4 scholarships. So 4 scholarship for this project and 6 for the Solidarity Fund. This is 2 different projects. So we have 10 scholarships for this year. So that is a very, very good project. So thank you so much for your attention. And so you have here my email address, so Delphine Dieudonné at ulb.be. And we have also a special address for the Solidarity Fund project, so solidarityfund at ulb.be. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Delphine, for this very interesting presentation. Congratulations to Université Libre de Bruxelles for all these activities. Concerning the program for the Afghan researchers, maybe you can put in the chat the link because there are actually online some researchers from Afghanistan today, so maybe they could be interested in looking at this opportunity also. And also thank you for sharing all the challenges. I mean, this is also very useful. This is usually what we do in UNICA events. We have to be very open. We know there are many difficulties in doing this. It's not easy, so it's good, I think, to share good practices, but also the problems we have when we try to do something in this very difficult area of activity. So thank you again, Delphine. So we continue now with the program, and it is a pleasure to give the floor to Giuliana Scognamiglio. She is the Rector's Delegate for Equal Opportunities at Sapienza, University of Rome, and she's also a member of the board of Scholars at Risk in Italy. And she will give a talk on Sapienza's experience. Please, Giuliana, the screen is yours. Giuliana, we don't hear you. Maybe you are on mute.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Luciano, and thank you for the invitation for this very interesting webinar, which is it is very important to exchange ideas and experiences in this very difficult field and very difficult challenges that that we share in Europe and not also in Europe, not only Europe. So I'm speaking to you as Luciano said, introducing me as a professor of Sapienza University. And at the time, I'm currently the Rector's Delegate for Equal Opportunities Policies. So I'm very committed to equal opportunities and inclusion policies. That's why I'm also very committed in these problems regarding scholars at risk and inclusion of migrants scholars in our university. I'm also speaking in my quality as representative of SAR Italy. SAR Italy is the Italian section of SAR. We have heard some very interesting keynote speech by Delphine Roche this morning. This is very, she has explained very well, very deeply how SAR Europe works and SAR in general. These very important networks between universities all over the world is working on the problem of scholars whose academic freedom and sometimes whose personal life or personal freedom or even life is at risk due to the political situation in the individual countries. So SAR, the Italian section of SAR, of Scholar at Risk International, was launched in February 2019, and having as coordinators the universities of Padua and Trento. Nowadays, currently SAR Italy has 38 members. Among them, Sapienza is one of them, and SAR Italy is collaborating with the Conference of the Rectors of Italian Universities and the Ministry for Universities and Research to promote at the national level a scholarship program for scholars at risk. That is a very important point. I will come back to it later. As above mentioned, since May 2019, Sapienza is a member of SAR International, and as a Rector's Delegate for Equal Opportunities Policies, I am the person who is participating in the general meetings of SAR Italy. And since March 2021, Sapienza is also a member of SAR Italy Executive Board. This is just to confirm our strong commitment to these problems. We feel a special responsibility as one of the biggest university in Europe, and as a university which is located in Rome, which is of course a city where many people coming from all over the world stay every day, comes and like to stay. But we are especially committed to these problems of scholars whose academic freedom is at risk. In 2020, Sapienza for the first time decided to allocate a special budget for a research fellowship for a scholar at risk. This experience I think is very similar to the experience which has been illustrated by the Belgian colleague. We received from the International Office of SAR in New York a list of applicants, anonymous profiles of scholars, applicants who were interested in having hospitality by our university, and a special committee was established in order to evaluate the scientific profile of the applicants. The main criterion for the selection is the research interest of the candidates and the possibility of allocation of the candidate in a department of our university in which the research project that he or she is carrying on can be implemented, can be carried out, integrating perfectly with the research objectives of that department. The International Office of SAR sent also a risk assessment of these candidates. So the risk assessment is made by SAR International. The activity of this commissions, of this specially established committee in Sapienza was the selection of the scientific profile. In January 2021, a call for a research fellowship for a scholar at risk was launched, and in June 2021, a grant fellowship has been awarded to a scholar at risk coming from a country where his academic freedom was not allowed, was at risk. That is the fellowship lasts 1 year. Also the support services are also activated for administrative procedures, residence permission, fiscal code, bank account, allowance, and other facilities, lodging, canteen service, universities facilities, libraries, etc. And programs or lectures, seminars, and research activities are organized in accordance with the scholar and the hosting department. The problem is the same that has been, we have the same problem that has been already illustrated by my Belgian colleague, that is financial resources are limited at the moment. The fellowships is an annual fellowship, so it lasts 1 year. The problem is that what happens after the year has expired, but I'm very pleased to communicate that Sapienza has, however, consolidated in its budget the allocation of an annual research grant. So this is we can say now that it is a stable provision in Sapienza budget. So it is very important. It is very important step, but it is only the first step. So I perfectly share the opinion of my Belgian colleague. It is a big challenge for us as universities, what to do when the fellowship is coming to an end, it is expiring. But this is also the importance of the network. That is a very big network. I already mentioned that only in Italy we have 38 members of SAR Italy, and the networks is very important. Also, could be very important also in the perspective of giving another possibility to this scholar, to this scholar at risk, in order to go on to with this experience, research experience in Italy. This is a very, very important point, a very big challenge, as already mentioned. Another problem is that in Italy we can positions in the universities, not only professor position but also fellowships, can be assigned only on the basis of an open competition, and it is important, so it could be an important step to launch a program for open competitions, competition that are open, but at the same time that are specifically dedicated to eligible eligible scholars at risk. So it is one of the objectives of SAR Italy at the moment. We had a meeting in October 2021, so approximately 2 months ago, with some senior representative of the Italian Ministry for University and Research. We discussed with them this possibility of dedicating a specific program for fellowships, annual fellowships, just for applicants who are eligible as scholar at risk. It is something completely new for Italy, because something that is a special program, but in some way not perfectly coherent with the principle of open competition, but the objective is very important. The representatives of the minister appreciated very much the strong commitment of SAR Italy to this objective of giving the scholars at risk a possibility of carrying out their research projects, and they assured us that they will be studying this possibility and give us some the result of their study in the next month. So we are waiting for an answer by the minister in order to prepare to organize a specific programs for scholars at risk. It would be a very important step forward. What else? We have, of course, as many other universities, we had a very active involvement in the speaking about the Afghanistan crisis, a very active involvement of our universities in order to give a safe opportunity to study in Sapienza. We gave hospitality to 138 Afghan students, and we are, of course, trying to go on with this project and to launch other projects in order to give hospitality not only to students from Afghan, but also to scholars at risk coming from that country. And a working group has been nominated to coordinate the activities internally and externally. A working group which includes the Conference of the Rectors of the Italian University, CRUE, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of Internal Affairs, and the Minister of Defense. And finally, we have been committed in many advocacy campaigns. So for Patrick Zaki, for Giulio Regeni, for Amadreza Dialali. Fortunately, one of them, the first one, was successful, as we heard from Patrick Zaki is now free. It was very important campaign in order also, you know, that Patrick Zaki is a student of one of our universities, which is Bologna University. As my Belgian colleague said very clearly, we have big challenges in front of us, but I think that with these important initiatives of collaboration and networking and exchange of ideas and experiences, we will be able to do very important steps forward in order to give our colleagues a possibility to live and to work and to teach in a safe environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Giuliana, for this very interesting presentation. And now we are a bit late actually with the schedule, so I really ask the next speakers to try their best to keep the time. It is a pleasure to give the floor now to Florian KOHSTALL, Program Head Global Responsibility at the Center for International Cooperation at Freie Universität Berlin, and he will give a talk on the Academics in Solidarity program at Freie Universität Berlin.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm just trying to. Okay, can you see the presentation?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, perfect. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to La Sapienza for organizing this important event. I think it is very important indeed that we as capital universities also exchange views on how we can cooperate in this endeavor, because I think in times of mobility and internationalization, of course, the question is on the long-term placement of at-risk and refugee scholars and students, of course. I will give you a small presentation about an initiative which we set up at the Freie Universität Berlin, which we started already in 2016, which is called Academics in Solidarity, which is a mentorship and peer-to-peer program for at-risk scholars and refugee scholars. To give you a little bit the context, the German context probably is that there are various programs now to support at-risk and refugee scholars, and most of them provide 2 or 3 year-long scholarship. We have already, the Philipp Schwarz initiative has already been mentioned. They have provided in the past 5 years more than 200 scholarships for 2 to 3 years for academics. Another initiative on the regional level is, for example, the Einstein Foundation program on academic freedom, which is especially operating in the region of Berlin, and there are various other initiatives. And we at Freie Universität Berlin are currently hosting 30 at-risk and refugee scholars, which is a considerable number. But of course, when we see this in a global light, it is still a relatively small number. Now, the problem, or where academics in solidarity start, is actually that in an extremely competitive academic environment like the German one, a 2 to 3 year scholarship is actually not enough to have a long-term perspective in the German or European academic system. And I think in order to increase the chances, what we have to do is to build networks for scholars, especially the at-risk scholars, so that they know already a little bit more about the formal and informal codes of getting integrated into the academic system. And this is actually where academics in solidarity starts. As I have mentioned, it's a peer-to-peer mentoring project. And the most important ingredients are the matching of our mentees. Mentees are the at-risk or refugee scholars. They can register as members in the Academics in Solidarity network. The precondition is that they have finished their PhD, that they are on a postdoc level, and they have this proven at-risk or refugee status. What we do then in the first step is matching. We match them with established academics within Germany, not only at Freie Universität Berlin, but at any of the German university. And the most important criteria for matching is, of course, their scientific interest. Because we believe in the fact that when you have a mentor that is already established in the system, that is working on a similar research, then you have most of the chances to collaborate with him in research and to get out out of this at-risk status into normal, let's say, normal funding opportunities. The second ingredient is training. I will explain this in detail a little bit more. The third ingredients are small grants to enable our members, which are the mentees, of course, in the first place, to pursue their research. And the third ingredient, or the fourth ingredient, is this network building. Now let's have a look at the several ingredients in a nutshell. So as I have already explained very briefly, the most important ingredient is matching. We are matching the mentees with experienced mentors. The mentors are meant to give them career advice, to introduce them in the formal and informal codes of the German academic environment. They do academic counseling, they explore funding opportunities together with the mentors, and they can also provide administrative support. In an ideal case, actually, mentees and mentors may apply for joint seed funding, for example, at Academics in Solidarity, and they engage in joint transnational research and they support each other in their career path. Training is provided by Academics in Solidarity in order to work on your own research project and apply for funding that is accessible for everyone, not only for at-risk or refugee scholars. We also provide workshops on publication strategies, on teaching concepts, intercultural competences, mentoring skills, and the career path beyond academia. This last point is, of course, very important, because when you consider that in Germany, the only real long-term possibility, and this is a huge difference to the environment, the academic environment of most of the refugees in their home country, the only long-term career option in academia at the university is a professorship. And of course, very few of those who receive this at-risk postdoc fellowship will finally be successful in applying for a full professorship. This is why it is also important to what I would call exploit or explore options without the university, but which can still be related to academic work, if it is, for example, employment in a think tank or in other fields where an academic background is needed and is also valorized. Now, the small grants, mentees in our program, so participants in our program, as I said, they can apply for different grants format. First of all, we provided grants for conferences and for workshops. And we have shifted a little bit these grants with the pandemic because of the difficulty to organize workshops. And now we also support publications, and we support joint research projects between mentees and mentors. Finally, we organize each year an annual conference where we pick up very important topics related to the long-term inclusion of at-risk and refugee academics. So in 2019, we started with the topic regaining lost knowledge. We continued with a conference in Amman, or virtual conference, together with partners in Amman on protected displacement. And this year we had a teaching in Exile, conference where the documentation is now online. Now, the last point is that we not only focus on Germany, we now have altogether 120 mentees in our program. 100 of them are in Germany, 20 of them are outside Germany. The the aim of the program is also to work together with partners in other important host countries, like, for example, Jordan and Lebanon for Syrian scientists and Iraqi scientists. And we consider this important to span also these kind of transnational networks. One day, we hope that the opportunity for return might be open. So this is why we think these networks are also important. Now, I will stop here. I would like to thank you very much, and feel free to contact us. Here's our email address. I'm guiding this program together with my colleague, Christina Rogers. And there's also the website where you can find more information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Florian. A very interesting example from Freie Universität Berlin. So now, last but not least, it is a great pleasure to leave the floor to Professor Joe KARTHY, a former Dean of the Faculty of Science at the University College Dublin. And he will give a talk on how can universities do more to support academics at risk.
Thank you very much, Luciano. And in the interest of time, I'm going to go very quickly, and I'm going to skip over some of my slides because some of my colleagues have already covered some of the points that I would have been making. So I'll be talking a little bit about what we do in UCD and then some advice for how other universities might start up programs. I can skip that one. So in UCD, we were awarded University of Sanctuary status in 2018. Martin has already explained what University of Sanctuary means. In the university, we have a vice president who's responsible for equality, diversity and inclusion. So the Sanctuary program came under his brief. He established two committees, one to focus on strategy and scholars at risk, and a widening participation committee to focus on students. The key thing for our program is in terms of students that we welcome all refugee applicants as well as people who have status. So even if you don't have status in Ireland and you're a student, UCD will accept you, and that's key. And we will treat you identical to an EU or an Irish citizen. So these students get the same treatment as our own students that need in the country. And that makes it simple for the university to administer, because like Martin's institution, we have a widening participation unit who support disadvantaged students. And so students at risk simply become part of that unit. So that makes it a lot simpler. And we've supported 69 students up to 2020, and about another 19 have started in the current year. The support we provide a full tuition waiver. So these students are charged no fees, regardless of their status. And we give them a small annual stipend that ranges, depending on how far they live from the university, from 3,000 to 5,000 euros per year. So those are the two key things: a fee waiver, so there are no fees. They automatically are charged no fees, and they get a small stipend. If they become official refugees and have a status in the country, then the government pays their pays their stipend. But in the meantime, there's always this gap between that happening, so the university pays the fee at that stage. And we have a dedicated worker in a team like Martin's team to support these students as well. In terms of scholars at risk, we introduced a formal scheme in 2021, and it's managed by that Sanctuary Committee. And the university has formally agreed to fund 3 scholars at risk for 1 or 2 year fellowships. The money involved there is approximately 35,000 euros per year tax-free. And so we have an arrangement with the government where academic fellowships can gain tax-free status. I won't go into it, it's complicated, but it works. And we work with CORA and SAR and other agencies then to identify the scholars, and that removes a lot of the burden from the university. So rather than the university committee having to decide which scholar is at most at risk or whatever, CORA or SAR, whatever, present us with the scholar, and then we see what school or department in the university we can find a home to host that scholar. Let's skip that slide. So the reason, or sorry, a small case study: before we became a University of Sanctuary, before we introduced a formal study, we did a pilot scheme with a scholar risk from CORA, and this academic came with a partner and 2 children. So we found a school in the university to host them and provide appropriate work. And we found a small support group then which helped the scholar find accommodation. Accommodation in Ireland at the moment is very, very difficult. We have a housing crisis in the city of Dublin. So this scholar had to live 60 kilometres away, but there's a really good bus service, so she's able to get to the university in approximately an hour. And we've found some local support there who were able to find a school for the children and get a partner, find a local job. So, and that didn't require as much work as that sounds like a lot of work, but actually that was done in a matter of days by a couple of people with some goodwill. And that family now are very happy in Ireland and are likely to stay in Ireland even when the fellowship in UCD finishes. I know from speaking to the academics, they have refugee status in Ireland and they will remain in Ireland, and we will support them as best we can to find another job. It's not our responsibility, but we'll do our best we can to support them. In terms of universities, then, if you're not doing this in your university, you have two approaches, a bottom-up approach or a top-down approach. I would advocate the bottom-up approach initially, that you persuade one department to take on a scholar at risk. The only thing there is that department needs to have some funding in place to support the scholar, and work with CORA, work with SAR, work with one of the international NGOs to identify a suitable scholar, and then get a small support group in your university, most likely in the school that will host the scholar, to actually help them get settled in. But we must remember the scholar is responsible for their own well-being. The support group can help them find accommodation, can help them do things, but the support groups shouldn't feel under undue pressure, because sometimes speaking to colleagues to say, well, what will happen if we can't do this? What will happen if they have special needs? What will happen? And all these hypothetical situations. At the end of the day, we're dealing with people, adults who are mature, who have made a decision to come to your country, and who can, by and large, look after themselves with a little help. So it's not a huge burden on a support group to help these people. The responsibility in with the individual themselves. If that approach works then for one scholar, then you might approach a university to see can you put a formal scheme in place, or approach another one. And I know that has worked in our university. That's how we started off, and now we have a formal scheme. But we started off with our pilot case study, and that worked really well. The top-down approaches go straight to your university management, and if you know, you can identify somebody in your university management who's sympathetic to this scheme, this may work. Give them an example, and you've seen today 3 or 4 examples of where this is working really well in universities. So give them an example of where it's working well, and ask why we couldn't do it in your own university. In terms of the students at risk, it's highly likely, as in Glasgow, as in UCD, that there are already existing programs for students who have some form of disadvantage, and universities are trying to incorporate these students into their communities. So it's just simply a matter of extending existing programs to include students at risk. So that should be a fairly straightforward matter, I think, for any university. In terms of financial costs for a university, to host one scholar, 35,000 per year, that's a very small amount in terms of a university's budget. For a department in a university, that might be a large one, but in terms of any of our universities, 35,000 euros is a small amount of money per year for a university to look after one person. And I would emphasize not to underestimate the value of hosting even a single scholar. That's a life-changing experience for that individual. It's also an experience for the colleagues in the university who support that individual, and the school that receives them as well. So it's such a worthwhile opportunity. So even if you only can support one, don't underestimate the value of that. And similarly, granting fee waivers. So if you have students who come in and need fee waivers, again, the amount of money for a university to cost there is very, very small. It's a small incremental cost having an extra student in your class. So it really doesn't cost the university anything to grant fee waivers to students. And if you have a small number of students who need 5 or 10K in terms of a stipend to support them, again, for the numbers of students we're talking about here, these are very small sums of money, and universities can find this in the situation we find ourselves in today, where with so many students at crisis point. So my final point here is that we live in a very strange time, and we in universities live in privileged environments very often, but we have a unique opportunity to support the vulnerable in our community. And students and scholars at risk are among the most vulnerable in the global society. So our universities can help them contribute in our societies, in our own countries, can help them contribute when they return to their own countries, if that's possible one day. And the question I ask for those universities who are not helping, and that is, what will we tell our grandchildren when they ask us, what did we do when these scholars arrived in our countries? What did we do when these students arrived? How did we help? And I think we in universities have the voice and have the position to be able to help. So I would urge other universities to get on board, to welcome a scholar at risk, to welcome students at risk into the university. I've flown to that, Luciana, because I know the Q&A session is important, so we'll open it up to questions and answers now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joe, for the excellent presentation, and also for this very inspiring conclusions. I think it's very important, for all of us to reflect on this last point, you mentioned. And now I would like to ask all the panelists to come back on the screen, because we have about 20 minutes for the final discussion. And the chat has been quite active, and I'm very pleased about that. First of all, I start with the last point that colleague Matteo Vespa is asking you, Joyce, to put maybe in the chat a link of the program that you mentioned about the support scheme for students at risk. That would be useful maybe for some colleagues. Sure. And maybe to start, I would like to maybe ask Denise and Sena I know that you replied already in the chat, but maybe you may want to add something, because we do have actually people in need online today, some from already in Europe. We have a colleague at the University of Bergen that is mentioning that actually his program is ending at the end of the month, and then he's asking, what actually possible to do, and also from Afghanistan, also people in need. So I know you already put a lot of information in the chat, but maybe you may want to add something. Thank you.
Just welcome to our scholars who are here and joining us today. All our applications are actually processed by our Secretariat in New York, and the fastest ways to apply for support is actually through our website, and it is secure. And so I would encourage, and the links are actually in the chat for anyone who needs assistance to apply. But I would have to say, and unfortunately, the demand is quite significant. As I said earlier, it's double all of countries combined last year in the number of applications that we have received in just a very short number of weeks. So I'm very sorry, but we have to apologize that it does take quite a bit of time to actually review the applications. So we're not able to immediately respond. So I know that's incredibly frustrating and probably perhaps an inadequate response to the crisis, but we are doing everything we can to speed up the responses. If you already have a hosting situation at the moment, but it's coming to an end, again, I would reach out to the protection services and get in touch with them, because they'll try and secure another host institution for you. And then, of course, this feeds into one of the bigger challenges that we are facing, is that when scholars leave their homes and they manage to actually engage with a host institution, that these are not permanent positions, they're only temporary. So what we are finding is scholars are moving from position to position. So one of the longer term goals and one of the bigger advocacy quests that we have in Europe at the moment is really start to push for national governments and for the EU to set up fellowships. And these would be more long term rather than for months or 2 years. We're looking for a longer period of time so that people can actually establish themselves.
Thank you, Denise. Please, Sena.
Sure, thank you. So I will address the point about the Afghanistan fellowship specifically. Again, as Denise just said, the demand is surely going to outstrip the offer. We are launching this program today. It's mainly aimed at those who are in Pakistan or in the surrounding areas. The fellowships are, I think there's 5 travel bursaries that could support some travel to Pakistan, but mainly we're seeing these as a stepping stone, as a kind of intermediary option for those who are looking to gain, they're about a year long. So this is, we're aware it's not the entire cycle of a PhD, but hopefully they will be a stepping stone for people who are aiming to go elsewhere, or who in the meantime will be able to secure more long-term opportunities. So I've put in the chat the links, and as I wrote there, the links are not active. They're being published as we speak. So hopefully by the end of the day, the links will be active and you can actually apply there. That is the best way to apply for these, and there's guidelines there. And if anyone is listening today in this webinar and you'd like to ask us some questions, you'll see there's an email address where myself and another colleague of mine, Francesca, will be responding to any queries.
Thank you, Sena. And indeed, also many thanks also to Francesca Menozzi for having put other information in the chat. Also, thank you to Teresa O'Leary from UCD, also for having put a link, related to what Joe mentioned before. So, and then another big question I have for the colleagues from the universities. We know very well that, there are many universities in UNICA and in CIVIS, very active in this field. And today we really had a very good panel of very good cases from very active universities. But the general point, that was already mentioned in some presentation, is that the resources are actually very limited. So we are trying our best, but in terms of numbers, when Sena presented the numbers, we know that more than 80 million people, are actually in need in the world and are forcibly displaced. And of course, we don't know exactly how many of them are scientists, how many of them are scholars, but indeed, we are talking about huge numbers. And the general impression is that, in terms of numbers, our universities, are not doing, enough. So the difficult question is, how can we increase, this, say, volume of resources? And of course, Joe already mentioned, some possibilities, like waivers, some scholarships, etc. But maybe that is also not enough. So the difficult question, to all of you, maybe we can do a round in the same order of the panel, starting maybe with Martin. If you can give, some possible ideas or suggestions for university networks like we are, because as I mentioned, UNICA represents 54 universities. CIVIS is now 9 universities, and very soon we will be 10. And we can, get together with other university networks in Europe, to try to voice these needs. So what would be your suggestions?
I don't know. It's a very, very complicated issue, as everybody's aware. I think, so in microcosm, my own university, we had various different teams and departments working separately on this issue and offering various different bits and bobs of support to students. And the University of Sanctuary process that I mentioned brought all of that together. And maybe you could sort of expand that out, kind of like what you're saying, Luciano, to really strengthening these kinds of networks so that we can sort of bring things together and make it a more sort of cohesive European-wide network. But I don't know how that sits with the UK being out of the EU now and all the rest of it. But I think that's the only way forward. I think is greater cohesion and working together. I think.
Perfect. Thank you, Martin. So we continue in the same order. Maybe Delphine, you want to add anything on this point?
Nothing special, but it's true that it's really a big challenge. And as I always say in my presentation, for ULB, we only have the own resources, and it's very hard to increase the number of scholarship. We would like to work more with other universities in Belgium. So this is one of the points that we would like to improve, is to work with other universities in Belgium to have the possibilities to offer some scholarship with other universities. And it's for the call for Afghan researchers is the first collaboration with another university. So it's very, very important point. And also this is the first time that we have decided to contact a foundation, a private foundation in Belgium, to ask if it's possible to have some funds for a scholarship for researcher at risk. So we will see if it's possible, but this is the first year that we have this idea. And we also would like to maybe work more with some University of CIVIS Alliance, because we are in the CIVIS Alliance, and so we think that it's maybe a good point to work together for this project, and maybe that we can propose to the researcher at risk to go to the other university of the Alliance. So yeah, this is the project that we hope that can maybe be a solution for the problem of the funds, but we will see if it works.
And thank you, Delphine. And now I would like to ask Giuliana also a comment there. I can start also as a member of Sapienza in this case, that I really noticed that in Italy has been very useful the work of SAR Italy. There was a very active newsletter and chat, and so a lot of information flew among the different Italian universities, giving examples, kind of encouraging university. That university is doing this, so another one was trying to emulate, the other one in the good practice. So I think this is also was a good dynamic in Italy, having several universities to talk about this, to try to again to do more. But Giuliana, please. I give you the floor.
Thank you, Luciano. Yes, very quickly. I think yes, most of us have observed that the problem is financial resources are very limited when we know the number of people who are candidates, who are applicants for this kind of fellowships or scholarships, and who are eligible. But what as I mentioned before, I think that I agree that the role of SAR Italy was in this perspective very important. It was very stimulating because it's raised the attention. It's very important. We have a very important stimulus from SAR Italy, and it is very interesting that after the launching of this Italian section of SAR, many universities have been committing themselves to these objectives that therefore were not in the attention. Where it means that does not mean that they were not important before. Of course, they have been always important, but the problem is that the attention of people, students, academics was not concentrated on this problem, and this is a very important merit. Very important. We are grateful to SAR Italy, and because the stimulus was very important. But now we have to go on. The first step has been made, but only the first. So what to do next? I think that there are some areas where the intervention of the support, the financial support by the state, by public institutions is not enough. At the moment is not enough. I don't know that I cannot say that whether in the future the state intervention, the intervention of the single states or the public institution of the single states could be increased. For me it's impossible to say at the moment. But what can we do is to activate and to promote the channels of the solidarity through the network, through the intervention of public or private foundations, and which could collect money from private institutions, or also even individuals. So it is the channel of solidarity is very important because we have an objective that has always been existing, but now it is very clear in our minds that it is important to intervene, to contribute and to pursue this objective. So the channel of solidarity could be activated, and I'm sure that I also spoke about this problem when the crisis, when the Afghanistan crisis in last summer. So I spoke also with our rector, and we thought about this possibility of activate foundations in order to collect money from solidarity channels. I think that this is an idea.
Thank you very much, Giuliana. We continue very quickly with Florian and then Joe, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think first of all that this event is a first step. It's very important to exchange information on these different programs, also probably on systems of long-term placement for displaced and at-risk scholars. Because I think finally their career path or academic, if it's going to be an academic career path, will be European. It will not be German or French, or it will be sort of European. So this is why it's very important to exchange this information. The other thing I would be interested is to work a little bit on the other flip side of what it means to do advocacy work for academic freedom. I think we cannot receive scholars from Turkey, from other countries, Syria, and work together just as business as usual with Turkish universities. So I think we have to also think about how we balance this policy of, on the one hand, receiving displaced and at-risk scholars, and how to do our internationalization policies and how to organize our international cooperations. I think that both goes together. I think going out of these relations is not the solution, but probably a European coordination on how advocacy work could work would be a second step. Thank you.
Thank you, Florian. And Joe?
Yeah, I would support Florian and some of the suggestions Denise made in her presentation as well, and the threat to academic freedom, which I learned quite a bit about that today that I wasn't quite aware of. I think lobbying EU, I think Florian's right, and we need EU funding for this, and extension of the Erasmus scheme, or one of these schemes, particularly for the students and for scholars' risk. I think that therein lies part of a solution to the funding aspect of this. I know it's a hugely complicated thing, and I think UNICA can support organisations like SAR and CARA in their lobbying of the EU as well to provide funding, because I think our national governments are stuck with funding as well, and certainly our universities are way underfunded, so they don't have the funding, even though I know I'm making a point that it's a small amount of funding, but that's only for an individual, for small scale operations. But to tackle this at a more systemic level, we need EU funding.
Perfect. Thank you, Joe. So we only have a few minutes left. Unfortunately, I would like to leave the floor again to Denise, maybe for one final minute of a comment, or, and then we need to close the meeting.
Thank you very much. Just picking up on some of those points, which were really well made. But just firstly, there is, of course, strength in numbers coming together and advocating as a group rather than one university. So this is particularly important when you're looking at national advocacy. And we've really seen this when it comes to our national sections, so that a government will actually, or ministries will actually talk to a group rather than one university. So when you're coming together and pushing for a national-based policy where the government will actually provide some funding towards these types of fellowships and these types of scholarships. And then once getting the government on board will also help in reaching and pushing the EU to also have a broader fellowship program as well. And there are steps being made, and we are pushing for these on both levels through our network. On the point of internationalization, of course, and taking, accepting scholars from universities and then carrying on as business. Yes, there is actually a lot of work underway in respect to this as well. And there's actually a very good example of this by a group in the UK, and they've actually developed a model code of practice that they want their universities to sign up to. So it's really about, when you are undertaking these types of international agreements and these international relationships, you really have to look at integrating academic freedom from the beginning, because right now many of the people that are negotiating these agreements don't really think about academic freedom. They're really thinking about the financial or the prestige considerations. So they want these agreements to emphasize the importance of academic freedom, but then really drilling down into what that actually means. And when there are difficulties with a particular university, when it comes to academic freedom, it's not to say that you won't undertake this agreement, but that the agreement will be adjusted and monitored to ensure the protection of academic freedom. So there's lots of work underway, and I think having meetings like this and people exchanging ideas, but also learning about what's actually already happening is extremely helpful. So this event today has been wonderful, and SAR Europe is here pushing for this work from the European perspective, and of course our office door virtually is always open, and you can always reach out.
So unfortunately, we need to close the meeting. It is a pity because the topic actually would deserve more discussion, but unfortunately, it's not easy nowadays to have events like this longer than 2 hours. I really want to thank all of you, all the speakers. Special thanks to SAR Europe, for being with us today and for having this very important talk at the beginning by Denise Roche. We will get together again. UNICA again is very active on this topic, and we will try to actually have together other networks, of course, working with SAR, because we are a collective member of SAR, but also, as I said, other alliances like CIVIS, but there are in Europe now 41 alliances with like CIVIS, so there is actually plenty of actors, which could get together and work, and of course other important university networks like UA, Coimbra Group, and many others. Also in the chat, there was an important intervention by René Mikalev that mentioned, of course, that there are other actors like the Refugee and Migrant Education Network. So I encourage René to get in touch with me, and then we can also talk about that, of course, and then maybe in the future to include other actors in our talk. Also, many thanks, of course, to other institutions represented here, like the World Academy of Science and IAP, and of course all the universities from UNICA and CIVIS that really presented very interesting, very useful cases, because as I mentioned before, showing I think examples can really encourage other universities which are not active yet to become more active. Many thanks also for the people who organized this event in Brussels, Laura Brossico and Laura Colò, and in Rome, Daniela Magrini and Anna Gamboggi. So many thanks to all of you, to all the participants, especially to the scholars in need who participated today in the meeting. Best wishes to all of you. We hope that you will find a good solution in the near future for your needs. So all the best, and we are looking forward to seeing you again in a UNICA event. Thank you.
Thanks, Luciano.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Luciano. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.